Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here. I find this story hilarious because it's always funny to see liberal politicians finally realize just how insane the left-wing activists are that they were trying to please for years. So, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his liberal government have recently slightly lowered immigration. Permanent residencies have gone from 496,000 to 395,000, and they've also reduced new temporary foreign worker visas and student visas. It's still way too high, but it's not high enough in the minds of the Migrant Rights Network, an organization that the Liberals would have probably taken consultation from before, but now they are big evil meanies because they don't want to have like 5 million people entering Canada each and every year. It's weird. I'm kind of having to defend Trudeau. At the same time, I'm going to be making fun of him throughout this video because Trudeau is the Canadian politics version of Wile E. Coyote. He wants to be super progressive and way overextends himself on these positions, and then is befuddled when the boulder comes and crashes down on his head when he has to lower immigration because moderate voters are leaving him, but then it's still not enough to bring the moderate voters back, but then it gets the radical activists on them because they just want more immigration at all times. But this is a post that the Migrant Rights Network made on its social media a couple of days ago. They say, "We demand change. Migrant and refugee leaders, along with housing advocates today, calling for an end immigration cuts and racist rhetoric, and bold action to address Canada's deepening housing and affordability crisis." Well, they're not really great at grammar checks, despite having so many hands on deck. But this is their leader at this event. Not that they're like the leader of the organization, but the person that they chose to represent them at this press conference. And again, this is on their social media. They thought this made them look reasonable and good.
These policies will result in over 2.3 million people being expelled over the next 2 years. And by reducing immigration, Prime Minister Trudeau is affirming the racist idea that migrants are responsible for the affordability and housing crises.
What did she think is responsible for the affordability and housing crisis when more people end up lowering the wages of Canadians because it's way more competition for jobs, which means nobody can do better than minimum wage. And obviously, more warm bodies in a given area is going to put more pressure on housing. But none of these people care about economics, so they think it's a racist idea to think that higher population is going to put a higher amount of pressure on the need for shelter.
Justin Trudeau calling us a tap to turn off and on when he likes. We are the farm workers that feed you. We are not the ones who get the money when the grocery store raises their food prices.
This is a distraction.
They're not the farm workers. You're not. Anyone can be the farm workers. I hate the idea that it was migrants who have to be the farm workers. No, if we had lower immigration and lower temporary foreign worker visas, Canadians would then take those jobs. This is where this is where open borders have destroyed the idea of what a Canadian job is. A Canadian job is any job, but now it's a temporary foreign worker job because they get wage subsidies, and because obviously, since they're mostly sending remittances home, or at least many of them are, they will take lower pay because the amount, that money, is worth a lot where they're from. And so what it's done is undermined a Canadian's interest in even getting one of these jobs because they're not available at a wage that would be like reasonable. And it's not like I'm demanding higher wages. I'm demanding the free market kick into gear properly, because this is not the free market. There are artificial incentives bringing people to this country to take these jobs.
Action from the policies, laws, and programs that could turn the tide of Canada's housing crisis.
Oh, you mean like, reducing regulations, reducing taxes? Like, we don't need to get rid of zoning laws. I think zoning laws are fine, but we could make it easier to build houses. But obviously, that's not what this lady thinks.
Migrants, international students, refugees, temporary foreign workers, and undocumented people are not responsible for Canada's housing, economic, or infrastructure challenges.
Well, the people responsible are the Liberals for letting in too many migrants.
Part of this issue is whether Canada chooses to treat international students and immigrant workers with respect for their labor and contribution to this country's economy, or instead as a disposable item to be used, scapegoated, and discarded.
The whole rhetoric here about scapegoated and discarded. Well, you are literally part of an oversupply of labor and an overdemand for housing. Nobody's blaming each and every individual immigrant. That would be stupid. But obviously, there is a supply and demand problem right now. There is far too much demand for housing, spurred on by too much migration. And because there's too large of a supply of labor, that means that we are not having wages go up for these jobs that Canadians won't work. Also, we could just lower taxes, but all these people are socialists and don't want taxes to go down.
Seulement 2 ans, ces mêmes personnes migrantes ont été désignées comme les travailleurs-travailleuses essentiels. Et au bout
I move on because I don't want to listen to the French here.
The Canadian government has massively reduced its commitment to offer protection to those fleeing persecution and danger in the world, and has further complicated the right to family reunification for refugees in Canada who will remain separate from their spouse and children for years to come.
Sorry. Why is it? Can I just ask, why is it that somebody is separated from their wives and children who came here as a refugee, so they abandoned their family? Just checking, we abandoned our family, and now we want the Canadian government to bring them into this country. You didn't care to get them to safety. You fled, and now you want the Canadian government to bring them here and presumably house them, give them benefits, and all this stuff. No. Justin Trudeau, at the same time these people are crazy, he deserves these people's ire because in a certain sense he did bait and switch them a little bit. But in the sense that he deserves realizing just how crazy these people are, and hopefully he will keep lowering immigration, realizing that these people are anti-Canadian. These people specifically do not like the West. Their actual about page says they want every single migrant in the country given permanent residency. That's insane. That destroys a country. You cannot take 100 million people from another country and then just dump them here. Not that anyone's proposing that, but that's just a hyperbolic example. If I just take 100 million people from any country and just slot them in Canada, it's going to be a completely different country because they haven't grown up here, they don't know the history, they don't really have respect for the culture, and they're just here for economic reasons. That's how you destroy a country and turn it into a post-national just cesspool. Just people here for no particular reason, don't care to be here, don't like it, they're just here for the money, and they don't like all the other people here either because they're not from their specific subgroup.
Migrants aren't taking jobs and homes. We feed the economy, raise it, we grow it. Without us, the social welfare net would collapse. Shutting us out
That's just not true.
will cause a social and economic crisis that no GST holiday can fix.
She's just wrong. She's just entirely wrong. And people being like, well, you need workers to be able to pay for Social Security in this country. Okay, fair enough. But that requires us to not have each new permanent resident, temporary foreign worker, and student who then becomes permanent resident from bringing dependents with them. This is also a problem with refugees. Yeah, you get one guy who's 37 and can probably work for another couple decades, but then the rest of his family members are already in their 60s, their 70s, or their children who may or may not actually end up staying in Canada and working here. So the problem is we end up actually adding people to the non-working demographics at a higher rate that we add new workers who are actually paying for all this stuff. Plus, it doesn't help pay for anything if you're making minimum wage or close to minimum wage and you're barely paying any taxes. We want skilled workers who create a lot of income that we can then pay for social services for. By the way, we could just lower taxes and we'd actually probably be bringing in more tax revenue by bringing people who with actual skills to Canada to set up businesses and to engage, to help mine natural resource, extract natural resources. But I want to get into some of the other stuff these people are doing. These people are such radicals. They were celebrating the fact that they literally just assaulted the immigration minister, Mark Miller. And as much of a clown as Mark Miller is, I almost feel bad for him here because you can tell on his face that he's disgusted by the kind of radicalism that the liberal immigration policies have wrought because these people feel entitled. That last lady that was speaking in the video I just played, who's also the one who opened it, is oozing with entitlement. These migrants deserve everything that Canadian citizens have paid for over decades. No, they do not. And now they feel entitled enough to bump up against a Mark Miller and prevent him from leaving the room without seeing their moronic faces right in his nose.
We are human beings and we are not have to be turned on and off. Hey everyone, we're here at Parliament. We were just at the Immigration Committee listening to Mark Miller.
Yeah, you're incredibly annoying.
Tell us his immigration level plans. We went outside to confront him. We held out signs inside of the committee. And when he came out, he shoved me and we were trying to talk to him, but he would not speak to us. Mr. Miller.
Who could guess why we don't want these people in the country?
We are the people you're trying to kick out of the country. We are human beings and we are not have to be turned on and off. Hey.
Can I say based Mark Miller there for a second for just pushing through this dweeb? Radical activists are just the thing that ends up destroying a country. People who think they're such good people for just advocating for more all the time. And now these organizations are actually attacking the conservatives and the liberals equally because the liberals failed to be insane. They still want high immigration. We still have high immigration numbers, but they don't think that's good enough. We need to be adding 3, 4, 5% to our population every single year. And now they're fighting back against people wanting to deport those who are overstaying visas, as we legally should be doing. I've even seen people advocating, saying, well, some of these temporary foreign workers and people on student visas were scammed into coming here by unscrupulous recruiters and immigration lawyers, saying that they had a job there for them, or saying that they had a school program they could attend and it was all fake. Okay, that's bad. We should be cracking down on these people committing fraud. Because someone was lied to does not mean that then we owe them a place in Canada. That's not how that works. And you should be skeptical of people lying to you. They're literally thinking that it's racist for people to go around with banners saying "Take Back Canada," wanting a lower immigration rate. These people associate not getting everything that they want with oppression because they are overgrown children. They have an adolescent attitude towards politics and policy. So Migrant Rights Network, media coverage, and public statements linking immigrants to the affordability crisis are distractions. No, it's accurate. It's, economically literate. These people are also far left. You can tell because they always are very much red bannered and everywhere they go. And the thing is that these people aren't the fringe. Workers' Action Center, Migrant Rights Network, and whatever, the Migrant Workers Alliance of Change or whatever, these are not fringe organizations. They have a lot of very powerful partners. Here is the members of the Migrant Rights Network, and this is just one of the organizations. They have Unifor backing them up. The largest public sector union organization is backing this insane far left organization who wants more workers, just wants more people in the country, which undermines Canadian workers. This is why I criticize unions so much in Canada. They are not in favor of their own members. They are in favor of revolution. Revolution all the time, more government power. You might get higher wages from being in a union, but that's only because they are trying to monopolize the labor industry, the labor pool. It is a tiny benefit for something that will eventually ruin the country if they get their way. These people don't actually have reasonable demands. The amount of organizations like cooperating with these people is nuts. On another graphic, I saw that QP Ontario was backing them, which isn't much of a surprise because of how crazy Fred Hahn is. But here's the About Migrant Rights Network. This is what they demand. Status for all. Permanent resident status and family unity for all migrants and refugees here, and landed status on arrival for those who arrive in the future. No detentions, no deportations. Decent work, $20 minimum wage, full labor rights, and no employer-specific or time-limited work permits, as well as democratic control over work. Yeah, so they want democratic control over work, which means they want to have labor unions and migrant labor unions monopolize the actual means of production. That this is what trade unionism is, believing that trade unions should run the entire economy, that they shouldn't just, control the labor pool, which is already authoritarian enough in many instances because you have no right to opt out of being part of the union. but they get to control the building itself, what we're doing, when we're doing it, and how much we're going to pay ourselves, which is a great way of completely ruining the economy and whatever business this gets implemented in. Universal services, full access to quality public services, including healthcare, education, income security, EI, childcare settlement services, pensions, and more for all residents. Justice for all, indigenous self-determination. Isn't it kind of not really indigenous self-determination as indigenous people in Canada become a smaller and smaller minority because of the just radical influx of new immigrants? Isn't this kind of all been very insulting to First Nations people? You know, they were here originally. We were in cooperation with them, getting along fine. And then we just water down the entire country with people who don't really like Canada, don't really care about our history, and are just here for basically economic reasons. But socialists only care about material things, so that's all they care about. But it says justice for all, indigenous self-determination, gender justice, and the end to racism, particularly anti-Black racism and Islamophobia. Particularly. So if there was anti-Semitism and, you know, people who are like, you know, anti-Christian, anti-white, anti-Hindu, any other specific things, anti-Asian, that pales in comparison to being to anti-Black racism and Islamophobia. That's ridiculous. So you can be anti-Christian, and that's a lesser offense compared to being Islamophobic or anti-Black. These people are so cooked in the head. And then they say, and specific policies to end social oppression. These people also use vague terms for a reason, because it allows them to pivot in any direction they want. No displacement, an end to practices that force people to migrate, including climate change, wars, corporate impunity, and economic exploitation. So no displacement. So we're going to ban climate change, and we're going to ban wars. These people don't have a head on their shoulders. It's insane how insane these people are. I can't even add anything to that. There's one more thing I want to touch on in this video, and it's just talking about just how radicalism has been basically normalized on the left. I got into this weird interaction with this lefty TikToker, Frank Dominic, a day ago. And if you haven't seen Frank Dominic, you'll probably recognize him once I bring him on screen here. But he made a video basically talking about why, you know, we have to understand the people on the radical left. People on the radical left are actually not that bad. It's actually only radicalism on the right that's bad, because you see people on the radical left are just so full of compassion.
An American content creator pointed out something that I think we should be thinking about in Canada. When you are radicalized on the left, that radicalization occurs because you have a mass influx of empathy for seeing people in situations that you would not want to be put in and that you think should not be happening, like homelessness, lack of access to healthcare, inequalities. When you are radicalized on the right, it is
say this to Mao Zedong and Pol Pot and Joseph Stalin and all those radical leftists, or Antifa members who go around smashing up windows, attacking people on the streets, firebombing cars, people throwing Molotov cocktails at synagogues, or people burning down churches in the middle of Western Canada because like a residential school grave hoax. Though they were just full of empathy. That's why they had to try and burn down a church. That's why they had to kill the bourgeoisie. Really?
Internalized, and you externalize hatred and anger.
Radicals on the right, they're the ones who internalize hatred and then externalize that hatred to others and people and different things in the world. It's so juvenile. The right, when they're bad, they're really bad. But what the left, when they're bad, they're not technically bad.
Radicalization on the right is specifically that you see things not going well in the world for yourself, and you choose to then put that out there by finding people to attack and marginalize. Because if we get rid of this one issue, if we get rid of this one problem, if we change this one thing, everything will be better for me. Radicalization on the left is, if we change this thing, it could be better for all of us. And I think that that is a great way of talking about how there is no just thing as a comparable difference between the far left and the far right. There is no comparison there. The far left doesn't exist. I feel like there's more to unpack here. Leave your thoughts in the comments below.
The far left doesn't exist. I hope somebody tells all those people who were killed by the Khmer Rouge, all of the dead Ukrainians in the Holodomor, all of the people who also were killed by the radical leftists in the Nazi party, because the Nazis are radical leftists. They're National Socialists. They believe in the government dominating the entire economy and people's social lives. They are leftists. They are basically identitarian leftists who collectivize things around race instead of class. That's the only difference. This is what leads to people who are marching in the streets saying that nobody's illegal. We just should throw open the borders and let anyone who wants to come in because it would be bad for those people to not let them come in. And I don't buy this thing that leftists are just radical because they care so much about people around them. They just care so much about trying to raise everybody up. No, so many of them are not so many of them, all of them are malcontents. They hate other people. Any radical, left or right, is driven by a hatred and for basically sin in their own heart. They go after other people for basically being rich. On the socialist left, they hate people who actually have incomes. This is what George Orwell even noticed when he was interacting with Northern English socialist organizations. They couldn't care less about actual working people. They just hated rich people. And I don't need to bring up the video, but it's Margaret Thatcher's point that if they would rather the poor be poor if the rich were less rich. Follow any of these people's videos on TikTok, Frank Dominic, Steve Boots, these type of people, and it's mostly complaining about people making money, not saying, I wish all these people were making more money. And if they cared about the solution, they would maybe want to lower taxes, lower regulations, make it easier to make an income, but instead they make it harder because they're just trying to make people who are making a lot of money make a little bit less money. If they could do that, wouldn't that be amazing? They're not empathetic. They're just malcontents. They're whiners. They have an adolescent attitude towards society and the economy. Anyways, that's it for me today, guys. If you want to support the show, subscribe, like this video, and if you want to support in a financial way, you can donate to the Give, Send, Go legal fund in the description below, as well as pinned at the top of the comments above my website, wyattclaypool.com. See you guys later.